Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where every tale brings a lesson that touches the heart. Today, we have a powerful story about love, transformation, and the unexpected ways that life can change. Follow James and Claire's journey as they navigate complex emotions, family expectations, and ultimately discover the true meaning of connection and commitment. The night was crisp, with a light breeze brushing through the towering buildings of Manhattan. The streets gleamed under the streetlights, the hustle and bustle of the city unyielding even as the clock ticked past midnight. Amongst the thrum of taxis and hurried footsteps, James Turner sat behind the steering wheel of his sleek black car, navigating the busy roads, his thoughts far away from the world outside. His mind raced with the weight of his father's words that had haunted him for days. "James, if you want to secure the future of this family, you need an heir." The command had echoed in his ears since the family meeting. At 35, James had achieved what most could only dream of: wealth, power, and an empire built from the ground up. His jewelry stores dotted the globe, each sparkling showroom a symbol of his success. But despite all of his accomplishments, one thing remained elusive: the approval of his father, Thomas Turner, the patriarch of the family. And now, with the terms of his inheritance hanging in the balance, James was faced with an ultimatum. He needed to have a child. Sitting in the comfort of his car, James gripped the steering wheel tighter, the weight of his situation bearing down on him. He had no wife, no partner, no one to bear his child. He had never considered starting a family, thinking it would only distract him from his goals. His relationships had been brief and hollow, an endless parade of superficial connections that lacked depth or meaning. But now, his father's stipulation seemed like a looming mountain that he couldn't avoid. As he drove through the city, his eyes occasionally flickering to the rearview mirror, he found himself lost in thought, unable to escape the gravity of his predicament. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a horn blaring, pulling him back to the present. He glanced up and saw a woman, hunched over, her hands on her swollen belly, sitting on the cold sidewalk of a rundown street. Something about her caught his eye: the worn clothes, the tired look in her eyes, but most of all, the vulnerability in her posture. She seemed out of place, and yet there was a certain dignity about her that was hard to ignore. For a moment, he thought about driving past, but something inside him urged him to stop. He pulled the car over to the side, the engine purring softly as he approached her. "Are you all right?" James asked, his voice tentative but filled with concern. The woman looked up, her eyes wary at first, but she seemed to relax when she saw his kind expression. She sat up straighter, wiping a strand of hair from her face as she gazed up at him. "I'm fine," she replied softly, her voice strained. James could tell by the way she held herself that she wasn't fine. Not in the least. Something about her seemed broken, as if she was carrying the weight of more than just the child in her womb. The silence between them stretched for a moment before he spoke again. "I can help you," he said, the words leaving his mouth before he could second-guess them. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Help me how?" James hesitated for a moment, the reality of his offer settling in. What was he doing? Talking to a stranger in the middle of the night like this? But as he looked at her, there was something about her vulnerability that tugged at him. Something inside him whispered that she might hold the key to solving the problem he had been wrestling with for days. "I need a child," he blurted, surprising himself with his honesty. "And you're pregnant." The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. "What are you talking about? I know this sounds insane, but I need help," James continued, his voice steady despite the absurdity of the situation. "You see, my father, he has a condition for passing down his legacy. I need to have a child, and you're pregnant. If you'll agree, I'll help you in return. I'll take care of you both." The woman stared at him, her brow furrowed. "So, you're asking me to have your child? Just like that?" James shifted uncomfortably, realizing how ridiculous his proposition must have sounded. "I know it's strange, but I can offer you a better life. You don't have to stay on these streets. You and your baby could have everything." She paused, her eyes searching his face. as if looking for a sign that he wasn't lying. Her gaze softened after a long moment, and she spoke in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. "My name is Claire," she said, her eyes still downcast. "And I don't know if I can trust you, but I have nowhere else to go." Claire's words resonated deep within James. He didn't know what had drawn him to her, but something in the pit of his stomach told him that this could be his chance to do something right. He extended his hand to her, offering a gesture of kindness. "Let me take you somewhere safe tonight," he said, his voice warm. "We can talk more in the morning. You deserve better than this." Claire hesitated for a moment before slowly taking his hand. Her fingers, cold from the winter night, rested against his palm, and for the first time in years, James felt something other than the coldness of his own heart. The drive to the luxurious hotel was filled with an awkward silence, but the weight of their shared moment hung heavily between them. When they arrived, Claire seemed overwhelmed by the extravagance of the place, unsure of what was happening. "This is your chance, Claire," James said as he handed her a key to a suite. "Rest tonight, and tomorrow we'll talk about everything." She nodded quietly, still trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken. But for once, she wasn't alone. As James walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in him had changed, that his life was about to take an unexpected turn. He had offered Claire a better future, but in doing so, he had unknowingly stepped into a path that would lead him to something he never imagined: real human connection. The morning after Claire's first night in the hotel, James arrived at her suite with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He had no clear idea where this unexpected arrangement would lead. But as he stood in front of the door, his mind wandered. He had offered Claire a safe place to stay, and now he needed to keep his word. But what had begun as a practical solution to his inheritance problem was beginning to feel like something more, something he wasn't prepared for. When Claire opened the door, she was dressed in the clothes he had arranged for her. And for the first time, she looked like someone who didn't belong in the harsh, unforgiving streets. The elegant dress he'd picked out for her highlighted the soft curve of her belly. And for a moment, she looked almost unrecognizable. James didn't know whether to feel proud for helping her or guilty for his initial, selfish intentions. He couldn't deny the soft tug of something inside him, an emotion he couldn't yet identify. "Good morning," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle as he tried to keep things professional. "Good morning," Claire replied, her voice still tinged with uncertainty. She didn't fully trust James. Not yet, but she felt something different today. Maybe it was the warmth of the suite, the comfort of the bed she had slept in, or perhaps it was just the fact that, for the first time in weeks, she wasn't worried about her next meal or where she would sleep. "I've been thinking," James began as they sat down for breakfast. A carefully prepared spread of fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee. "We should start figuring out a plan for what's next. I know this isn't exactly the easiest situation, but we can make it work. I can help you with anything you need financially and otherwise." Claire nodded, but there was hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't naive. She had seen the world James lived in, a world of luxury, power, and privilege. She had been born into a different world entirely, and no amount of expensive food or clothes could change that. But something in her heart, something in the way James was speaking, made her believe that this wasn't just about a business arrangement anymore. "What do you want from me?" she asked, cutting through the tension between them. Her voice was steady, but the question hung in the air, sharp and clear. James took a breath, trying to choose his words carefully. "I don't want anything from you, Claire. Not in the way you're thinking. I'm just trying to make sure you and your baby have a good life. You deserve that." Claire met his gaze, searching for any hint of deception. But there was none. His words were sincere, and it struck her that he wasn't just offering her charity. He was offering her a chance. A chance at a future that had seemed impossible just a day ago. "I can't promise this is going to be easy," James continued, "but I want to help you, and I want us to work together to make sure things go smoothly with my family. I need to convince my father and brother that this is legitimate. It's not going to be easy to get them on board." Claire looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had no interest in living a life based on lies or deception. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the baby inside her, a life that needed security, stability, and a future. She had no other choice but to trust James, at least for now. "I'm willing to try," she said softly, her eyes locking with his. "But I need to know this is real. For my sake, and for the baby's." James nodded, a sense of relief flooding through him. He hadn't expected Claire to be so open to this, and he hadn't expected her to take such a big step forward. But in the days that followed, the connection between them grew deeper. James saw Claire's strength in ways he hadn't anticipated. She didn't just endure her circumstances, she rose above them. She was smart, resourceful, and kind. She didn't seek sympathy, she sought solutions. As they spent more time together, James found himself drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. Her quiet strength, her determination, and the care she showed for the baby inside her stirred something inside him. For the first time, he realized how little he had ever truly known about what it meant to be compassionate, to connect with someone beyond the superficial. He had spent so many years focused on business, wealth, and power that he had neglected the most fundamental part of life, the importance of human connection. But with Claire, everything felt different. The moments they shared, whether it was discussing her plans for the future or simply enjoying a quiet evening together, felt real. He had never felt this way before, and it scared him. As he watched Claire grow more confident in her role as a mother, he realized he had begun to care for her in a way that went beyond their agreement. He was falling for her, and he didn't know how to stop it. Claire, for her part, was feeling the shift too. At first, she had kept her distance emotionally, wary of getting too attached. But as she spent more time with James, she began to see a different side of him, one that didn't revolve around his wealth or his status. She saw the way he cared for the baby, the way he put her needs first, even when it wasn't convenient. She had always believed that the world was cold and indifferent. But James was starting to show her that there could be warmth, even in the most unexpected places. But with their growing connection came inevitable challenges. Claire's fear of rejection lingered, and James's family would not be easy to convince. His father, especially, was a man of strict principles and expectations, and he would never accept a relationship that appeared so unconventional. The pressure of pretending to be a couple while navigating the realities of their lives weighed heavily on both of them. James found himself at a crossroads. He had begun to care for Claire in ways that went beyond obligation, beyond convenience. He had begun to see her not just as a means to an end, but as someone he wanted in his life. But he also knew that the future of his inheritance depended on their success, and that brought its own set of complications. For Claire, the future was uncertain. She was no longer just a woman in need of help. She was becoming someone who could shape her own destiny. But she still had fears, doubts about whether James's intentions were truly pure or if he was just using her for his own gain. Could she trust him with her heart and her future? As they both tried to navigate the murky waters of their arrangement, the tension between them continued to grow, each of them unsure of what the future held. But one thing was certain: their lives were intertwined now, and there was no going back. The days following their decision to continue with their plan passed quickly, but they weren't without their challenges. The more time James spent with Claire, the more he found himself questioning his initial motives. What had begun as a simple business arrangement to fulfill a family obligation was slowly transforming into something far deeper, something that terrified him, yet filled him with a warmth he had never known before. Claire, too, had begun to see things differently. At first, she had approached the arrangement with caution, always keeping her emotional distance, never allowing herself to believe in the possibility of something real between them. But with each passing day, she couldn't ignore the way James treated her. He was respectful, patient, and kind in ways she hadn't expected from someone like him, a man of wealth, accustomed to getting what he wanted, no questions asked. His support for her and the baby was genuine, and for the first time, she began to allow herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Despite the growing bond between them, a heavy tension still hung in the air. James had yet to tell his father about Claire and their relationship, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was just a pawn in a game of high stakes. She was terrified that once the baby was born and the conditions of the inheritance fulfilled, James would simply walk away, leaving her and the child behind. One evening, as they sat together in the living room of his apartment, James finally voiced what had been weighing on his mind. "Claire," he began, his voice hesitant, "I know I haven't been completely upfront with you about everything. I've been struggling with what this arrangement means for us. For me." Claire looked up, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her heart racing in her chest. She knew something was coming, but she wasn't sure if she was prepared to hear it. James took a deep breath and continued. "When I first asked you to do this, to have a child for me, it was because I thought I had no other choice. I thought it was a means to an end, just a way to fulfill my father's demands and keep my family's business intact. But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize that it's not just about that anymore." Claire's heart pounded. She had braced herself for the worst, expecting him to tell her that this was all just a business deal, that he had no real feelings for her. But his next words were unexpected. "I've been falling for you, Claire," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I would feel this way. I didn't want to feel this way. But you show me something I didn't know I was missing. Something real. I want to be here for you. For us. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Claire stared at him, her mind spinning. She had heard the words, but she couldn't quite process them. James, the man who had once been driven by power and wealth, was telling her that he wanted something real with her. For the first time, it felt like the walls she had built around her heart, walls she had kept up to protect herself and the baby, began to crumble. "But what about your family?" Claire whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "What about your father? You're still tied to this promise you made to him. And I'm scared. James, I'm scared that once this baby is born, you'll walk away." James's heart tightened as he reached for her hand. "I can't promise you everything will be easy, Claire, but I promise I won't walk away. I'm going to fight for you, for us. This isn't just about fulfilling an inheritance condition anymore. This is about building a life together. I want to be the man you can count on. I want to be there for the baby. I want to be a family." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she stared at him. She had wanted to believe that he was more than just a man with wealth and power. But now, she saw the sincerity in his words. The man sitting before her wasn't just the wealthy businessman who had hired her to bear his child. He was a man who had transformed, who had learned to value something beyond money and status. For the first time since they had met, Claire allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future, a real future, with James and with the baby. But their journey wasn't without its complications. The day after their conversation, James received a call from his father, Richard. It was time for the official meeting, the one that would determine whether James would inherit the family business. As he drove to the meeting, his mind was clouded with doubt. Would his father accept Claire as part of the family? Would his brother Luke, ever the skeptic, see through the arrangement? When James arrived at the Cruz family mansion, he could feel the weight of the moment. Claire, sitting nervously beside him, took his hand, offering him the silent support he needed. Together, they walked through the grand hallways of the mansion, ready to face whatever was coming next. Richard Cruz, a man of strict principles, was waiting in his study. His sharp eyes scanned James and Claire as they entered. And for a moment, there was silence, an uncomfortable silence that filled the room. "Well," Richard finally said, his voice steady, "I see you brought her here. James, I must admit, I never thought you'd actually go through with it, but I'm pleased to see you've made the right decision." James glanced at Claire, his heart racing. "I'm not just doing this for the business, Father," he said, his voice firm. "I'm doing this for her, for the baby. This is about family." Richard's expression softened, just slightly, before he nodded. "If you say so, son, I trust you to handle this. But you know the stakes. Luke will be watching closely." James and Claire exchanged a glance, knowing that this was only the beginning of the journey. There would be challenges ahead, challenges with family, with their own insecurities, and with the world that would judge them. But for the first time, they felt ready to face it together. As the meeting concluded, James knew that the real test was still to come. He would need to prove to his family, to Claire, and to himself that he was ready for this new life. But as he walked out of the mansion with Claire by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. James and Claire had already begun to forge their future together, one step at a time, and with each step, their love, their trust, and their commitment to one another grew stronger. In the story of James and Claire, we are introduced to two characters who, on the surface, seem to have little in common. One a wealthy businessman, driven by his family's expectations, and the other a woman from a humble background, forced to make difficult choices to secure her future. Their journey together teaches us several profound lessons. James, initially motivated by a need to fulfill his father's demands and retain his family's wealth, learns that true success is not defined by money or power. His transformation begins when he opens his heart to Claire, realizing that his wealth cannot fill the emptiness he feels. The most important lesson he learns is that love, trust, and connection are the real foundations of a fulfilling life. By caring for Claire and the baby, he shifts from a life of self-interest to one of genuine compassion, discovering the joy of unconditional love and responsibility. Claire, on the other hand, demonstrates resilience and courage. Initially, she is wary of James's intentions and the arrangement they've made, knowing that her heart and future are on the line. However, as she grows more confident, she learns to trust both James and herself. Claire's sincerity and her ability to remain grounded in the face of overwhelming challenges inspire James. And in turn, she begins to see her own worth. The story reveals that even in the toughest situations, one's integrity, strength, and heart can transform adversity into opportunity. Together, James and Claire's relationship exemplifies the power of transformation through love. Their story teaches us that material wealth is fleeting, but the true treasures in life lie in human connection, empathy, and the courage to face challenges with an open heart. Through their growth, they inspire us to value what truly matters: love, trust, and the willingness to change for the better. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. James and Claire's journey reminds us that love, compassion, and genuine connection are what truly matter in life. We hope you found inspiration in their growth and resilience. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more moving tales.